When she knocked on his door at 9:30 p.m. with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile, David had no idea that this unexpected visit would change both their lives forever. David never thought his boring Thursday evening would change his life forever. He was sitting at his small wooden desk, papers scattered everywhere, trying to make sense of building plans that seemed to mock him with their complexity. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, and his eyes burned from staring at blueprints under the dim yellow light of his cheap desk lamp. The apartment building he called home wasn't much to look at. Built in the 1960s, it had character, which was a polite way of saying it was old and creaky. The walls were so thin he could hear Mrs. Chen from 2A practicing piano at 7 every morning, and Mr. Rodriguez from 3C watching his evening news just a bit too loud. But it was affordable, and for a junior architect still paying off student loans, affordable was everything. David had moved in 3 months earlier when he landed his first real job at Peterson & Associates, a small architectural firm downtown. The work was harder than he expected. Drawing pretty buildings in college was one thing, but dealing with demanding clients, building codes, and senior architects who treated him like he knew nothing was completely different. Tonight had been particularly rough. Mrs. Williams, a wealthy client who wanted to renovate her mansion, had rejected his third design proposal. She called his ideas uninspiring and lacking soul. The word still stung as he rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his coffee mug, only to remember it was empty. He was about to get up for a refill when he heard it. A soft knock on his door, not the confident rap of the mailman or the impatient banging of his upstairs neighbor, who occasionally locked himself out. This was gentle, almost hesitant, like whoever was out there wasn't entirely sure they should be knocking at all. David glanced at the clock. 9:30 on a Thursday night. Who could possibly want to see him at this hour? He wasn't expecting anyone, and his few friends from work usually called before dropping by. His family lived 3 states away, and his ex-girlfriend, well, she had made it very clear that surprise visits were not going to happen. The knock came again, a little more confident this time. David pushed back from his desk, his chair creaking in protest. He walked across his small living room, stepping over a pile of laundry he had been meaning to fold for 2 days, and approached the door. Through the peephole, he saw her. He had noticed her before, of course. It was impossible not to notice someone like Elena Rodriguez. She lived in apartment 3B, just down the hall from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who always smelled like vanilla cookies and asked everyone about their day. Elena was the kind of person who seemed to bring color wherever she went, literally and figuratively. Her fingers were always stained with paint in different shades, sometimes blue and green like ocean waves, other times warm yellows and oranges like sunset. She had this easy, genuine laugh that echoed through the hallways when she talked to other residents. Unlike most people in the building who hurried past each other with polite nods, Elena actually stopped to chat with people. She remembered names, asked about sick relatives, and somehow always knew when someone was having a bad day. David had been attracted to her warmth from the moment he first saw her in the lobby, struggling with grocery bags while trying to check her mail. He had helped her carry the bags to the elevator, and she had thanked him with such genuine gratitude that it made his whole day brighter. But he had never worked up the courage to do more than exchange pleasantries and smile when they passed in the hallway. Now here she was, standing outside his door at 9:30 at night, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression he couldn't quite read. She looked nervous but determined, like someone who had spent a long time working up the courage for something important. David's heart started beating faster. He ran a hand through his messy hair, suddenly aware that he was wearing his oldest t-shirt and jeans with paint stains on them from helping his friend move last weekend. He took a deep breath and opened the door. "Hi," Elena said, her voice softer than usual. Up close, he could see the paint under her fingernails was a deep purple today, and there was a small smudge of yellow on her cheek that she had apparently missed when washing up. "I know this is really forward of me, and I hope I'm not bothering you, but I've been thinking about this for weeks now, and I finally decided I needed to just do it." She held up the bottle of wine, a nice red with a label David didn't recognize. "I'm Elena. I know we've talked a few times in the hallway, but I don't think we've ever properly introduced ourselves. And I think," she paused, taking a breath like she was about to jump off a diving board, "I think we really need to talk." David stood there for a moment, completely caught off guard. Part of him wondered if this was some kind of dream brought on by too much coffee and stress. But Elena's nervous smile was real, and the bottle of wine in her hands was definitely real, and the way his heart was pounding was absolutely real. "Of course," he said, stepping back to let her in. "Please come in. I'm David, by the way, though I guess you already knew that from the mailboxes." Elena smiled, and some of the nervousness seemed to leave her face. "Actually," she said, stepping into his apartment, "I know more about you than just your name." Elena stepped into David's apartment with a confidence that surprised both of them. She moved past his small entryway like she belonged there, but David could see her hands shaking slightly as she set the wine bottle down on his kitchen counter. The sound of glass meeting wood seemed unusually loud in the quiet apartment. David quickly moved some papers off his only good chair and gestured for her to sit, but Elena remained standing. She was looking around his apartment with curious eyes, taking in the blueprints taped to the walls, the stack of architecture books on his coffee table, and the half-finished model of a building sitting on his windowsill. "Your apartment is exactly what I thought it would be like," she said, but not in a mean way. There was something warm in her voice, like she was seeing something she had hoped to find. David felt a bit embarrassed about the mess. His place was small and cluttered with work stuff, nothing like the stylish apartments he saw in magazines or on social media. "Sorry about the chaos. I wasn't expecting company, and work has been crazy lately." Elena turned to face him, and David noticed she was wearing a paint-stained cardigan over a simple white shirt. Even her casual clothes somehow looked artistic on her. She took a deep breath like someone preparing to jump into cold water. "David, I need to tell you something, and I hope you won't think I'm weird or creepy." She paused, running her fingers through her dark hair. "I've been watching you." David's eyebrows went up, and Elena quickly raised her hands. "Not in a stalker way, I promise. It's just that my apartment window faces the courtyard, and your window is right across from mine. Sometimes when I'm painting late at night, I see your light on, and you're always working on something." She started pacing a little, the way people do when they're nervous, but trying to explain something important. "You work really late, David, way later than anyone should. And I've seen you helping Mrs. Patterson with her groceries, and you always hold the elevator for people even when you're clearly in a hurry." David didn't know what to say. He had never thought anyone was paying attention to these small things he did. They just seemed like the right thing to do. Elena continued, 3 weeks ago, something happened that I can't stop thinking about. You were getting your mail from those old mailboxes downstairs, remember? The ones that stick and you have to really pull on them?" David nodded. Those mailboxes were older than both of them and needed to be replaced years ago. "Well, you had this big portfolio with you, and when you opened your mailbox, some papers fell out. The wind from the front door caught them and scattered them all over the lobby floor." Elena's eyes lit up as she remembered. "You looked so frustrated, but you just started picking them up one by one. I was coming back from buying groceries and I helped you gather them." Now David remembered. He had been mortified that his personal drawings had scattered everywhere for anyone to see. Those weren't work blueprints or official building plans. They were his private sketches, the ones he drew when he couldn't sleep, when his mind was full of ideas that had nothing to do with his day job. "I tried not to look," Elena said quietly, "but I couldn't help seeing them." "David, those drawings were incredible. They weren't just building plans. They were like stories told through architecture. There was this one sketch of a house, but it wasn't just any house. It was designed around a big old tree, like the tree was the most important part, and the house was built to protect it and celebrate it." David felt his cheeks getting warm. That particular drawing had come to him after visiting his grandmother's old house before it was torn down. There had been a massive oak tree in the backyard that he used to climb as a kid, and he had imagined what it would be like if someone built a house that honored that tree instead of cutting it down. "And there was another one," Elena continued, getting more animated now, of what looked like a community center, but it had these amazing windows positioned so that the light would change throughout the day, creating different moods in different rooms. And there were little details everywhere, reading nooks, quiet corners, spaces designed for people to feel safe and comfortable. She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "David, I went home that day and I cried. Actually cried. Because I realized that someone else in this world understood something I've been trying to express my entire life." "What do you mean?" David asked softly. Elena sat down on his couch, finally seeming to relax a little. I'm an artist, as you've probably figured out from the paint stains that follow me everywhere. But I don't paint portraits or landscapes or abstract shapes. I paint spaces. Rooms, buildings, places where people live and work and dream. And for years I've been trying to capture this feeling that spaces have emotions, that buildings can hold memories and dreams and hopes. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement. Your drawing showed me that you understand this too, that you don't just think about how to make a building strong or functional, but how to make it feel right for the people who will live in it, how to make it tell a story. David sat down across from her, his mind racing. No one had ever understood his personal work before. At his job, everything was about efficiency and cost-effectiveness and meeting building codes. Beauty and emotion were luxury items that clients rarely wanted to pay for. I've never shown those drawings to anyone at work, he admitted. They'd think I was being impractical, too idealistic. Elena smiled, and for the first time since she knocked on his door, she looked completely relaxed. That's exactly why I had to come talk to you tonight. Because I think we see the world in the same way, and that's incredibly rare. What Elena did next would stay in David's memory for the rest of his life, not because it was dramatic or shocking, but because it was one of the most honest moments he had ever witnessed between two people. She stood up from the couch slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. There was something different in her expression now, a mixture of nervousness and determination that made David hold his breath without realizing it. David, she said quietly, I want to show you something. Something I've never shown to anyone in your field because I was afraid they'd think I was just playing pretend, that I didn't understand the technical side of architecture. She reached for the hem of her paint-stained cardigan and began to remove it carefully, folding it and placing it on the back of his chair. Underneath, she wore a simple white tank top, and David was about to look away out of politeness when he saw them. The designs on her arms and shoulders weren't just regular tattoos. They were blueprints come to life, architectural drawings that seemed to flow and breathe on her skin, detailed building plans that transformed into artistic brushstrokes, structural beams that curved and twisted like tree branches reaching toward the sky, doorways that seemed to open into infinite possibilities. David's mouth fell open slightly. As an architect, he could recognize the technical precision of the structural elements. These weren't just pretty pictures that looked like building plans. They were actual architectural concepts, carefully planned and mathematically sound, integrated with flowing artistic elements that made them look alive. My father was an architect, Elena said softly, turning slightly so David could see how the designs wrapped around her shoulder and down her back. Antonio Rodriguez. You probably haven't heard of him. He never became famous or won big awards. He worked for a small firm in Phoenix, designing houses and small commercial buildings. She traced one of the designs with her finger, a beautiful cantilever structure that seemed to defy gravity as it extended into a watercolor painting of clouds. But he had dreams. Big dreams. He would stay up late at night just like you do, sketching ideas for buildings that would change how people lived and worked. David moved closer, his professional curiosity overcoming his personal awkwardness about the situation. The technical details in the tattoos were stunning. He could see load-bearing calculations worked into the artistic elements, sustainable design features that were ahead of their time, and innovative uses of space that he had never considered. This building here, Elena said, pointing to an intricate design that covered most of her left shoulder, was going to be a community center for kids in low-income neighborhoods. Dad designed it so that every room would have natural light, and there would be indoor gardens where kids could learn about growing food. The roof was designed to collect rainwater, and the walls would be made from recycled materials from old buildings. Her voice became quieter, more personal. He died in a car accident when I was 15, before he could build any of his dream projects. All I had left were boxes and boxes of his drawings, blueprints for buildings that would never exist. David could see the emotion in her eyes, but also something else, pride, determination, love for her father's memory. When I turned 18, I decided to carry his work with me always. But I didn't want to just copy his drawings exactly. I wanted to add my own interpretation, my artistic vision, to show how his technical brilliance could inspire emotional responses. She turned to show him her other arm, where geometric building structures flowed seamlessly into abstract paintings of people, families gathering, children playing, elderly people sitting peacefully in garden spaces. These painted elements represent the human stories that his buildings were designed to hold. The mischievous smile that crossed Elena's face was born of pure relief and joy. For years, she had carried these designs on her body, knowing that they represented something important, but never having anyone who could truly understand their technical significance. I've been afraid to show these to anyone in architecture or construction, she admitted. I was worried they'd think I was just some artist playing around with building designs I didn't really understand. But when I saw your personal sketches, I realized you might be the first person who could see what my father was trying to achieve. David was still studying the designs, amazed by their complexity and beauty. Elena, these are incredible. Your father was brilliant. This sustainable design approach, these innovative space solutions. He was decades ahead of his time. He looked up at her face, seeing the hope and vulnerability there. And what you've added to them, the way you've shown the human element, the emotional impact of spaces, it's exactly what architecture should be about, but so rarely is. Elena's smile grew wider, more genuine. She had spent years wondering if her father's work was as special as she remembered, or if she was just a daughter's biased memory making it seem more important than it was. There's more, she said, reaching for her phone. I've been painting based on his designs for years now. Large canvas paintings that combine his technical drawings with my interpretation of the stories. Those spaces would tell. She scrolled through her phone and showed David photo after photo of massive paintings that took his breath away, buildings that seemed to breathe with life, architectural spaces that told stories of human connection and community, structures that looked both technically sound and emotionally powerful. This is a painting based on his design for a library, she explained, showing him a canvas where bookshelves curved like tree branches and reading areas were nestled like birds' nests among the knowledge. And this one is his plan for affordable housing that would give every family their own small garden space. David looked at painting after painting, seeing not just artistic skill but deep understanding of what architecture could be when it served human needs instead of just following rules and budgets. Elena, he said finally, you haven't been playing pretend. You've been carrying on your father's work in the most beautiful way possible. These paintings show things that most architects never think about. How spaces make people feel. How buildings can build communities. How design can serve dreams and not just functions. David stood there in his small living room, completely amazed by what he was seeing. Elena had put her cardigan back on, but the memory of those incredible architectural tattoos was burned into his mind. As a professional architect, he had studied thousands of building designs, but he had never seen anything that combined technical brilliance with such emotional depth. Can I ask you something? David said, moving to his kitchen to get glasses for the wine Elena had brought. That cantilever design on your shoulder, the one that extends into the painted clouds, how did your father solve the load-bearing calculations for something that complex? Elena's face lit up with excitement. This was exactly the kind of question she had hoped someone would ask someday. He spent months working on that. I have all his notebooks and calculation sheets. He developed this innovative truss system that distributes the weight through multiple support points hidden within the artistic elements. She pulled out her phone again and showed David photos of her father's original drawings, covered in mathematical formulas and structural engineering notes. See, he wasn't just dreaming up impossible buildings. Every single design was mathematically sound and could actually be constructed. David studied the photos, zooming in on the technical details. His professional mind was racing as he recognized advanced engineering concepts that most architects his age had never encountered. This is incredible work. Your father was solving problems that the industry is just starting to tackle now with sustainable design. He opened the wine Elena had brought and poured 2 glasses, handing one to her. I have to ask, have you ever thought about actually building any of these designs? Elena took a sip of wine and sat back down on his couch. That's my biggest dream, but also my biggest fear. I have all the artistic vision and my father's technical plans, but I don't have the professional credentials or the business connections to make something like this happen. What do you mean? Elena sighed, looking down at her paint-stained hands. I went to art school, not architecture school. I understand my father's work because I grew up around it, and I've spent years studying his notes and teaching myself about construction principles. But in the real world, who's going to trust a painter to oversee a major building project? David sat down across from her, his mind working on the problem. You know what's interesting? At my firm, we have the opposite problem. We have all the technical training and professional credentials, but most of our projects end up looking like every other building on the block. They're safe, they meet code requirements, they get built on time and under budget, but they don't have any soul. He got up and walked to his desk, gathering some of his personal sketches that Elena had mentioned seeing. Look at this project I'm working on right now for my job. It's a small office building downtown. The client wants something modern and efficient. He showed Elena the official blueprints, a standard rectangular building with regular windows and minimal decoration. It looked like dozens of other office buildings throughout the city. Now look at this, David said, pulling out one of his personal sketches. This is what I wanted to propose instead. Elena gasped when she saw David's alternative design. It was the same basic office building, but transformed with curved walls that followed the natural light patterns, a rooftop garden that would provide green space for workers, and an innovative window system that would adjust throughout the day to optimize both light and energy efficiency. David, this is beautiful. Why didn't you propose this version? Because it would cost more up front. It uses building techniques that local contractors aren't familiar with, and it would require convincing city planners to approve something different from their standard requirements. David's voice carried frustration that had been building for months. My boss would probably laugh at me if I suggested something this innovative. Elena studied the sketch more carefully, her artistic eye picking up details that impressed her. But look at what you've created here. This building would actually make people happy to work there. These curved walls would reduce stress. This rooftop garden would give people a place to relax and connect with nature. And these windows would make every office feel more spacious and welcoming. Exactly. But the construction industry moves slowly. Most clients want proven solutions, not experimental ideas. Elena set down her wine glass and looked at David with growing excitement. What if we combined our skills? You have the professional training and the credentials that people trust. I have artistic vision and my father's innovative designs that nobody has ever seen before. David felt his heart start beating faster. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting a partnership. You bring the professional credibility and current industry knowledge. I bring the creative vision and the advanced sustainable design concepts my father developed. Together, we could create buildings that are both technically sound and emotionally powerful. Elena stood up and started pacing again, the way she did when ideas were flowing. Think about it, David. What if we entered that city design competition that's coming up? The one for revitalizing the downtown arts district? David knew the competition she was talking about. Peterson and Associates had considered submitting a proposal, but they had decided it wasn't worth the effort since they probably wouldn't win against the larger firms. Elena, that's a huge project. The winning design will actually get built, with a budget of several $1 million. The competition includes firms from across the country with decades of experience. Exactly, Elena said, her eyes bright with possibility, which means they'll all submit similar proposals, safe, conventional designs that look like everything else that's already been built. But what if we submitted something completely different, something that combined cutting-edge technical innovation with real artistic vision? She pulled up photos of her paintings on her phone again, showing David canvases that depicted community spaces designed around human connection. Look at this painting based on my father's community center design. What if we adapted this concept for the Arts District competition? A building that serves multiple purposes. Gallery space for local artists, workshops for kids, performance areas for musicians, and community meeting rooms. David looked at the painting with new eyes. Instead of seeing it as just an artwork, he began to see it as a potential blueprint for something real. The structural challenges would be significant, but they're not impossible. With modern materials and the engineering concepts your father developed, we could create something that nobody has ever seen before, Elena finished. Something that would actually serve the community instead of just filling empty space. David walked to his window and looked out at the city lights, his mind racing with possibilities. Elena joined him, standing close enough that he could smell her paint and the faint scent of the lavender soap she used. It would be a huge risk, he said quietly. If we failed, it could hurt both our careers. Elena smiled that mischievous smile that had brought her to his door in the first place. But what if we succeeded? What if we actually won and got to build something amazing? David turned away from the window and looked at Elena, seeing the hope and determination in her face. Something had shifted in the air between them during their conversation. What had started as an unexpected visit from a neighbor had transformed into something much bigger, a chance to create something meaningful together. "Okay," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Let's do it. Let's enter the competition." Elena's face broke into the biggest smile he had ever seen from her. She actually jumped a little like a kid who had just been told Christmas was coming early. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it. But we're going to need to see your father's original technical drawings, not just the photos on your phone, and we'll need to move fast. The competition deadline is only 6 weeks away." Elena grabbed his hands, her paint-stained fingers warm against his. "David, you have no idea what this means to me. I've been carrying my father's work around for years, hoping someday I'd find a way to bring his ideas to life. And I've been drawing buildings that I thought would never exist outside my imagination," David replied. "Maybe together we can make both our dreams real." They spent the rest of the night planning. Elena went back to her apartment and returned with 3 large boxes filled with her father's architectural drawings, calculation sheets, and project notes. David cleared off his dining table and they spread everything out like pieces of a giant puzzle. Antonio Rodriguez had been even more brilliant than David had initially realized. The man had designed systems for natural cooling that would eliminate the need for air conditioning in most climates. He had developed methods for using recycled materials that were stronger than traditional construction materials. He had even figured out ways to integrate food gardens into building structures without compromising their structural integrity. "Look at this," David said, holding up a detailed drawing of a wall system that incorporated living plants. "Your father invented green building techniques that construction companies are just starting to experiment with now, 20 years later." Elena leaned over his shoulder to see what he was looking at. Dad was always ahead of his time. He used to say that buildings should work with nature, not against it. By sunrise, they had the foundation of their competition proposal. They would design a multi-purpose community center for the arts district that combined Elena's artistic vision with her father's sustainable building innovations and David's knowledge of current building codes and construction practices. The building would have 3 main sections. The ground floor would be a public gallery with walls that could be reconfigured for different types of art displays. The second floor would house workshops and classrooms where local artists could teach kids from the neighborhood. The third floor would be performance space with acoustics designed specifically for music and theater. But the really innovative part was how all these spaces would be connected. Instead of separate, isolated rooms, the building would have flowing, interconnected areas that could be opened up for large community events or divided for smaller, intimate gatherings. Natural light would stream through carefully positioned windows and skylights, changing the mood of each space throughout the day. The roof would be a community garden where people could grow vegetables and flowers, and the building's walls would incorporate living plants that would help purify the air and reduce energy costs. Rainwater would be collected and recycled, and solar panels would be integrated so seamlessly into the design that they would look like artistic elements rather than utilitarian additions. "This is going to be incredible," Elena said, looking at their rough sketches as the morning light filled David's apartment. "But we have so much work to do," David nodded. "I'll need to take time off from my regular job to focus on this. And we'll need to create professional presentation materials, technical drawings, cost estimates, environmental impact studies. I can handle the artistic presentations and the community impact proposals," Elena said, "and I have enough money saved up to cover materials and printing costs." They shook hands like business partners, but there was something more personal in the gesture. They were no longer just neighbors who had discovered a mutual interest. They had become creative collaborators with a shared mission. Over the next 6 weeks, David and Elena practically lived in each other's apartments. David would work on technical drawings and structural calculations during the day, then come home to find Elena painting visual representations of their ideas. She created stunning artwork that showed what the building would look like in different seasons, how the spaces would feel during different types of community events, and how the building would age and change over the years. They argued sometimes about details, Elena wanting more artistic flourishes, David worried about staying within budget and building codes. but they always found compromises that made their design stronger. 3 days before the competition deadline, they submitted their proposal. It included 40 pages of technical drawings, cost analysis, environmental impact studies, and artistic renderings that brought their vision to life. 2 months later, David was at work when he got the phone call. "David Rodriguez speaking," came the voice on the other end. David's heart stopped for a moment, thinking it might be Elena's father somehow calling from beyond. Then he realized it was probably a relative. "This is Roberto Martinez from the Downtown Development Committee. I'm calling to inform you that your proposal for the Arts District Community Center has been selected as the winning design." David almost dropped the phone. "We won?" "You won. The committee was unanimous in their decision. Your design was unlike anything we've ever seen. Technically innovative, environmentally responsible, and clearly designed with real community needs in mind. When can you and your partner Elena come in to discuss the construction timeline?" David ran out of his office and drove straight to Elena's apartment, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He knocked on her door, and when she opened it, he picked her up and spun her around right there in the hallway. "We won," he shouted. "Elena, we won!" Mrs. Patterson opened her door to see what all the noise was about, and when Elena and David told her the news, she started crying happy tears and invited them in for celebratory cookies. 12 months later, David and Elena stood in front of their completed building, watching families explore the gallery spaces, kids attending art classes, and teenagers rehearsing a play in the performance area. The rooftop garden was thriving, and the building's energy systems were performing even better than their calculations had predicted. The building had brought them professional recognition. They had been featured in architectural magazines and invited to speak at design conferences. But more importantly, it had created something beautiful and useful in their community. Elena looked at David as they watched kids playing in the building's central courtyard, where her father's innovative design created perfect acoustics for laughter. Her mischievous smile had evolved into something deeper, the satisfaction of dreams made real. "My father would have loved this," she said quietly. David put his arm around her shoulders, paint-stained as always. "I think he did love this. He just needed us to make it happen." The building still stands today, busier than ever, a testament to what's possible when courage, creativity, and technical skill come together in service of something bigger than individual success.